Hi, you guys. I'm Laura, and this is my really dear friend, Sally. And thank you so much for joining us today. So, when the whole pandemic started and we started to shelter in place, I just really got to thinking of I don't know, just the importance of community and friendship in my own personal life and in all of our lives and the interconnectedness of everyone. And it also dawned on me, as I started to look at my role and how I could be helpful in my community during the shelter in place, it started to dawn on me just kind of all the heartfelt work that my friends and people I know are already doing. And the first person that came to my mind was Sally, because Sally does work with incarcerated people. And I just have for a long time been like, I just as a friend need to learn more, but I'm sure so many other people would be interested in hearing what that kind of work is like and what that process has been like for you, Sal. And so I just wanted to take a few minutes today and carve out some time to celebrate your work and your heart and learn more. So do you want to tell us just a little bit about this line of work and kind of just how you fell into it? How did you fall into working with incarcerated people?
Sure. I guess I always was sort of interested in and kind of called to social type work and helping people. Um, but really, I didn't really learn about sort of the prison um, industrial complex and the prison system and mass incarceration until college. And it was basically while learning about oppression and racism and institutionalized racism and systems of oppression. And that's when I learned that basically the prison system is one of the biggest upholders of it's one of the biggest industries of racism basically.
Mm-hmm.
So, or systems. And so that being said, basically right out of college, one of my first jobs was in an organization or a thing called Youth Court. It's basically a juvenile justice diversion program. So it's helping youth, instead of getting involved in the system, having an alternative and that's more restorative. And it was being basically sentenced by a jury of their peers, which sounds weird, but it actually historically and statistically reduces the recidivism rate because there's a big aspect of community and it's restorative rather than punitive. So punitive is punishment and restorative is more holistic and healing related. So I did that job for a year. I mean, it felt really good. It felt and that also in that job I learned a lot, but it was a nonprofit and I couldn't really support myself. I wasn't really making any money.
Mm-hmm.
So I left that job after a year and I started kind of I went into a corporate job and did that for a few years and then was able to support myself. But then I really did start getting sort of called back to doing something that gave me a purpose. Mm-hmm. And I had moved to Los Angeles and a family friend volunteered in this organization called Inside Out Writers, where volunteers teach creative writing inside juvenile halls. Mm-hmm. And so basically I, reached out and became a volunteer. But the thing is, it really was for writers. And I'm not exactly a writer, but I knew I wanted to work with the youth and that population. And so I have had experience writing in my own life, like for personal transformation, but not, I'm not like a published writer, but in this organization, they have like movie writers and TV writers and, real writers, but I did slip in, and I started volunteer teaching at Inside Out Writers. And then I basically stayed there for, well, up until now, but basically like 6 years. So yeah, and then while I was there, I learned, well, first of all, I didn't really know what I was getting into. I had never really worked with like that population. When I was working in youth court in Marin, I was like a different population. The demographic in Marin County, is like primarily white, and like the socioeconomic status is a lot higher. But in Los Angeles, it's very different. And also these youth were already incarcerated. So, yeah.
I love it's so, I've known I've known the bits and the pieces of that, but it's just really nice to kind of like hear you explain your process and your journey and kind of how one thing led to another, which is very much, I think, what happens when we're following our heart. It's like we just keep getting pulled back and finding kind of our next step. And I'm just so curious to know, I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of different kind of just heartfelt moments or moments when you were doing that work that really pulled on your heartstrings, but are there any that kind of stand out right now that you could share, just of like, I don't know, not that they have to be life-changing, but where they altered the way that like your perspective?
So yeah, with prison and incarceration, there's a really big stigma of criminals and, basically like bad guys. And I think our system, like the penal system and everything, like it just really supports that. And it's like, if you do something bad, then you're punished. But the thing is with our system is that you're punished. But a lot of people who go in, who get involved in the system have, I don't know what the rate is, but have a high rate of when they come out, like reoffending. It's called recidivism. And the system is set up for people to really fail. Like once they get like involved in the system, and a lot of the kids come from poverty. So it's kind of like they're already set up because most people that are incarcerated or become incarcerated are like come from poverty. So anyway, but a really big belief with Inside Out Writers and a lot of the prison reform work and incarceration work and restorative justice work is about second chances. And so I was kind of early on teaching this one class, and the class that I taught for years, it was a unit of boys, basically like 14 to 18 years old. And they were considered developmentally delayed, which is a term that they would acquire based on like whether they were getting services from the county, so like mental health services or behavioral health. Anyway, so like they were a tough group. Like no other teachers really survived them. Like people would be like, "Oh, you're a teacher for RS. Oh my gosh, like how do you handle it and stuff?" And basically, I mean, I pretty much taught that unit and not really any other unit. So I never really knew anything else. But yeah, they're just, to me, I just feel like they're 14 to 18-year-old boys. Like their brains aren't fully developed yet. They're like have hormones. They're like have ADD. I mean, many kids, or if that's even, considered or whatever, diagnosed ADHD or something. Anyway, one day, so they're not allowed to have anything inside. They're not allowed to have pens. They're not allowed to have, but we bring in pens and paper for the writing, and sometimes like videos, like on a laptop or pictures or something. And so I was at the beginning and I hadn't really gotten my system down yet. Like you hand out the pens, you collect them at the end. And it's like, they could use it as a weapon, or they could get in trouble for having it. Like that's what they, say, or if they wanted to hurt themselves, like, and I mean, it's a bad scene in there. Like it's make me depressed. Anyway, so I passed out the pens, we did the lesson, and at the end, I didn't get all the pens back. After this, like it never happened again because I had the system down. Like they had to return the pen and in exchange for a snack, like, but I hadn't figured it out yet. And so I didn't get all the pens back. I was like missing one pen. And I'm like, okay, like we're not leaving until someone, coughs up this last pen. Like, and they're like, what? Like, we don't have them. We don't have the pen. And I was just like, God, did I count the pens right? Like I couldn't really remember if I did, and I was like, did I, mess up? I don't know. And I made, their, basically correctional officer was there, and he, I said, well, I'm missing this pen. And he basically, like, after I left, so he had me leave, and then I guess he searched them all. They like got in trouble, and then he like searched them. And then when I came back the next week, basically they told me, and the correctional officer told me that they didn't find a pen. And I was just like, wow, like I really, and I felt really bad. Like, and the kids, they gave me a guilt trip, but they also were forgiving. And yeah, I just remember, they were just like, wow, you really didn't trust us, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, it's probably traumatizing for them to get searched and like the whole situation. And they were, yeah, they let it go, and they let me, they forgave me. I think they gave me a tough time about it for a while after that. But yeah, it was just like, I don't know. It just made me feel like, these kids can be forgiving. These kids haven't even had a chance, like have barely had a chance, like their kind of lives have already been kind of like stacked. The cards have been stacked against them. And like, I don't know, they didn't really have to give me a second chance, but they did. So yeah.
I love that story. What I was thinking of as you were talking is just kind of like the humanness in that, and I think it's so easy for people on the outside of prisons and jails to be like, oh, well, they're bad people. And like it's like a way of not looking at it, right? And not really looking at the reality of the situation. And then to hear you describe that experience, it's a reminder of like the humanness of these children that are in there. And me thinking about my own children when you were talking about like how the system is very like punitive. And, my work has, I wear many hats, but they're kind of all aligned with like mindfulness and meditation and parenting, and a lot of the tools that we teach just in the community are like, okay, how do I cultivate new skills instead of just being punitive? Because we know that being punitive doesn't work. Like we know that punishment makes not only children, but all people like retract. It stops executive brain function, like it's not a place where someone can like cultivate a new understanding or really like give critical thinking to even the things that they want to change about themselves. Like we all just kind of shut down when we feel punished. And so, yeah, hearing about how the system is very much like leaning to that anyway. And then these children, it's like, yeah, it is what you said, like the cards are stacked against them. And it is so important for like, I mean, for you to go back to, it's like they forgave you and you forgave yourself, right? Like you had to model self-forgiveness of being like, yikes, I made a mistake. I didn't have the system down. Like that was embarrassing. I goofed, but like, hey, I showed up anyway and I continued my work. It's like, I'm sure it built trust on both sides. So I love that story. And I guess I would just ask, like, as a final question, and you're going to write some responses too. So we do have more questions that people will be able to read, but just in this conversation between us, a final question is like, how do people help? Like, I can't necessarily go in right now to like, well, right now you probably can't go in anyway because of the shelter in place, but I don't know. I mean, I'm doing work right now with a company called Children Incorporated, where I do Arbonne. Sally and I were just talking about Arbonne before this, but I sell Arbonne, which is like health and wellness products. And then I give 50% of all of my sales to this company called Children Incorporated. And they work with impoverished youth. And those are the kids, like, right? Because those are the kids that are more susceptible to going into the system. And so it's like, how do we support one another? Like, what steps can we take? Even if it's at a small scale, what would you say to anyone watching this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm like so happy that you asked me to, talk about the work and stuff. And I think that it's a population and a topic that most people, I mean, in our society and, don't know much about. And I think that's not like a coincidence, I think it's easy for people to not think about it because it's such a kind of horrific like situation. But yeah, I mean, I didn't know kind of the first thing, and I'm still learning. I mean, doing like prison reform work and but I think, I mean, a place to start is like Google it, like prison reform, juvenile justice. There's like some really good authors. Michelle Alexander is an author, and she wrote The New Jim Crow, which is a really great book, all about mass incarceration. And yeah, I mean, I think, Google is just a really great place to start. And then, wherever you live, you can see, I mean, there are organizations, and now today more than ever, there is work being done on basically prison reform and for system impacted people, because there's the people that are incarcerated that are negatively affected, of course, youth and adults, but the families of the people who are incarcerated are like highly impacted. So yeah, I think that's a really good place to start. And of course, anyone can reach out to me. I live in Los Angeles, and there's a lot of really amazing work going on down here. But definitely in the Bay Area, there's a lot of stuff going on too. So,
and maybe we'll include some of those links in the
yeah, that'd be awesome.
And like put the book link and some things, because I know that's something I would like to read and learn more about.
But I think, like being curious is is the first place, and then doing a little asking.
Yeah. I love that. And I love you. And I'm so grateful that you took your time out of your Sunday to be here and to do this with me. And It's just amazing. Like, it's just amazing all the things that people are doing to make differences in the world. And I think in a time that can be filled with so much negativity, it's just nice to take a break and hear about like the positive. I mean, this is a hard work that you're doing, but you going and giving your time and your energy and your thoughtfulness to it, there's so much beauty and positivity in that. So thanks, Sal. And
Yeah.
I'm excited to read your article.
Yeah.